If you drive in the United States, especially if you're over 65, there's something you need to know right now because 3 driving rules are changing quietly across the country, and most people won't realize it until it's too late. This isn't a rumor. This isn't speculation. These changes are already active in several states, and they're designed in a way that can catch even careful, law-abiding drivers completely off guard. One missed detail, one overlooked notice, or one small assumption could suddenly affect your license, your insurance, or even whether you're allowed to drive at all. And here's the part that really matters. One of these rules is already costing drivers money and mobility before they even understand what they did wrong. That's why you need to stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what's changing, who it affects most, and how to protect yourself before you're forced to deal with the consequences. This update matters now more than ever because the way driving laws are enforced in the US is changing. For decades, most drivers were used to a system that relied heavily on human judgment. If something went wrong, there was often a warning, a grace period, or at least a chance to explain. That era is ending. State DMVs and transportation departments are moving toward automated systems, real-time monitoring, and stricter enforcement policies that leave very little room for error. And the truth is, these changes don't just affect reckless drivers or repeat offenders. They affect everyday people, retirees, commuters, parents, grandparents, people who have been driving safely for decades and assume they're doing everything right. The problem is the rules are shifting under their feet across multiple states. New regulations are being rolled out under the banner of public safety. On paper, the goal sounds reasonable. Fewer accidents, fewer uninsured drivers, and less distracted driving. But in practice, these rules are being enforced in ways that can feel sudden, unforgiving, and confusing if you're not prepared. Notices are sent digitally. Databases update instantly. Penalties trigger automatically. In many cases, by the time a driver realizes something has changed, the system has already flagged them. That's why awareness is no longer optional. It's essential. And let me be very clear about something important. This isn't about fear or panic. This is about information. When you understand the rules ahead of time, you stay in control. When you know what the DMV is looking for, you can prepare. The drivers who run into trouble aren't usually careless. They're uninformed. They assume Renewal will work the same way it always has. They assume a one-day insurance lapse won't matter. They assume glancing at a phone at a red light is harmless. Those assumptions are exactly what these new rules are targeting. What we're seeing now is a coordinated shift happening across states. Not all at once, but steadily. A rule might start in one state, then appear in another, then quietly expand. Some drivers hear about it early, most don't. And seniors in particular are feeling the impact first. Not because they're unsafe drivers, but because they're often subject to additional requirements that didn't exist before. That's why this update deserves your full attention, whether you're 25 or 75. Because the ripple effects don't stop with one age group. Over the next part of this video, I'm going to walk you through these 3 new driving rules step by step. I'll explain what changed, why states are doing this, and how people are getting caught off guard. More importantly, I'll show you what you can do right now to stay compliant, avoid fines, and protect your ability to drive legally. Some of this may surprise you. Some of it may challenge what you've always believed about driving laws, but all of it is information you'll want before your next renewal notice, insurance payment, or routine drive turns into a problem you didn't see coming. And as we move forward, keep this in mind. None of these rules exist in isolation. Together, they represent a new mindset from the DMV, a move toward constant verification instead of occasional checks. Once you understand that pattern, everything else starts to make sense. And that's where the first rule comes in because it's already affecting millions of older drivers, often without warning. And it changes something many people assumed was settled for life. The first major change you need to know about is mandatory vision retesting for drivers over the age of 65. And this is where many people are getting caught completely off guard. For years, renewing a license became routine. A form in the mail, a quick online renewal, maybe a new photo every so often, and that was it. But in several states, that process has quietly changed. If you are 65 or older and your license is coming up for renewal, you may no longer be allowed to renew online or by mail. Instead, you could be required to appear in person at a DMV office and pass a vision screening before your license is approved. And for many drivers, this requirement only becomes obvious when the online system suddenly tells them they're not eligible to renew the way they always have. What's important to understand here is that this isn't being introduced as a future idea. In some states, it's already happening. Drivers show up expecting a simple renewal and leave with restrictions, delays, or instructions to see a doctor before they're allowed back behind the wheel. The reasoning behind this change is rooted in safety data. As drivers age, the risk of vision-related issues increases even when someone feels their eyesight is good enough. Conditions like cataracts, glaucoma, and macular degeneration often develop gradually. Many people adjust without realizing how much their vision has changed, especially when it comes to contrast night driving or peripheral awareness. From the DMV's perspective, vision is one of the most critical factors in safe driving, and they've decided that relying on self-reporting is no longer enough. But here's where this becomes personal. Imagine you've been driving for decades without a single serious incident. You know the roads, you know the rules. Driving represents independence. Grocery runs, doctor appointments, visiting family, staying active. Now imagine walking into a DMV office, expecting a 5-minute appointment and being handed a vision chart you haven't looked at in years. You struggle to read a few lines. The examiner tells you your vision doesn't meet the standard for unrestricted driving. Suddenly, you're not just renewing a license. You're facing the possibility of restrictions or additional medical evaluations. For many drivers, that moment is shocking, not because they're unsafe, but because no one warned them this was coming. It's also important to clarify what failing or struggling with a vision test actually means, because there's a lot of fear around this. In most cases, it doesn't mean an automatic loss of your license. Often, it leads to conditions. You might be required to wear corrective lenses while driving. You might be limited to daytime driving only. In some cases, you may need a follow-up exam with an eye specialist who can confirm whether your vision can be corrected to meet the standard. The problem is not the rule itself, it's the surprise. Drivers who walk in unprepared are the ones who feel blindsided. Drivers who prepare ahead of time usually have a much smoother experience. That's why preparation is everything with this first rule. If you're over 65 and your license renewal is coming up within the next year, the smartest thing you can do is schedule an eye exam before the DMV ever tells you to. Make sure your prescription is current. If you need new glasses or updated lenses, handle it on your own timeline instead of under pressure. If you already know you have a vision condition, talk to your eye doctor honestly about your driving. That conversation is far easier to have in a medical office than at a DMV counter. When you walk into a renewal appointment prepared, you're in control of the outcome instead of reacting to it. Now, while this first rule affects older drivers the most, the second rule affects absolutely everyone, and it's one of the fastest moving changes we've seen in years. It involves car insurance, and the way the DMV now verifies coverage has changed in a way that leaves almost no margin for error. For a long time, insurance enforcement was mostly reactive. If you got pulled over, you showed proof. If you were in an accident, coverage was checked. If your insurance lapsed quietly, you might not face consequences right away. That system no longer exists in many states. Real-time insurance verification is now directly linked to DMV databases. And the moment your coverage lapses, the system knows. Here's how this works. In simple terms, insurance companies now report policy status electronically and continuously. If your policy expires, is canceled, or lapses for any reason, that information is transmitted to the DMV almost immediately. There is no waiting period. There is no human review asking why it happened. The system simply registers that your vehicle is no longer insured. Depending on your state, that can automatically trigger a registration suspension, fines that can range into the hundreds of dollars, and in some cases, even a license suspension. And all of this can happen without you being stopped by police or involved in any incident at all. What makes this especially dangerous for everyday drivers is how easy it is for a lapse to occur: a missed payment, an expired credit card, a bank error. Switching insurance companies and assuming the dates overlap, even a single day without coverage can be enough to set the system in motion. Many drivers don't realize anything is wrong until they receive a notice in the mail, or worse, until they're told their registration is suspended and they can't legally drive their own car. By that point, fixing the problem isn't just about reinstating insurance. It often involves fees, paperwork, and delays that could have been avoided with one simple check. This new enforcement method doesn't care about intent. It doesn't care whether you forgot, whether you were busy, or whether you thought you were covered. It only sees one thing: active or inactive. That's it. And because it's automated, it moves faster than most people expect. That's why staying insured now means more than just paying your bill. It means actively monitoring your coverage. Automatic payments help, but they're not foolproof if your payment method expires or changes. Verifying that your policy is active, especially after renewals or provider changes, is no longer optional. It's part of responsible driving under the new system. As strict as this rule feels, it's only the beginning of where enforcement is headed. And the third rule takes that same zero-tolerance, technology-driven approach and applies it to how you behave behind the wheel, especially when it comes to distractions. The third rule is where many drivers are getting the biggest shock because it changes not just the penalties for distracted driving, but how it's enforced and what actually counts as a violation. For years, most people associated distracted driving with one thing: texting while driving. If you weren't typing a message behind the wheel, you probably assumed you were safe. That assumption is now outdated. Several states have expanded their distracted driving laws so broadly that behaviors many drivers considered harmless can now result in steep fines, points on your license, and even suspension if it happens more than once. And unlike the past, enforcement no longer relies only on an officer catching you in the act. Under these new rules, distracted driving is defined far more aggressively. It doesn't just include texting or holding your phone to your ear. It can include looking at your phone, scrolling a playlist, checking a notification, adjusting a navigation app, or even glancing at your screen while stopped at a red light. In some states, the vehicle doesn't even need to be moving for the law to apply. If your engine is on and you're interacting with your phone in a way an officer interprets as distraction, that can be enough. And the penalties reflect how seriously states are taking this shift. First, offenses that once resulted in modest fines can now cost several hundred and add points to your driving record. Second, offenses escalate quickly, sometimes leading to license suspension, mandatory safety courses, and insurance rate increases that follow you for years. What's making this rule especially impactful is the technology now being used to enforce it. Law enforcement agencies in multiple states have begun deploying advanced detection systems designed specifically to identify distracted driving behavior. These systems use high-resolution cameras, sensors, and artificial intelligence to detect when a driver's eyes are down, when a phone is being held, or when hand movement suggests device use. Some of this technology is mounted on patrol vehicles. In other cases, it's installed roadside or integrated into existing traffic monitoring infrastructure. When the system flags potential distracted driving, it alerts officers in real time or captures evidence that can be reviewed later. In some areas, this enforcement is moving toward automation, similar to red light or speed cameras. That means you may not even realize you were cited until a notice arrives in the mail. There's no conversation, no warning, no chance to explain that you were stopped or that you weren't really using your phone. The system records behavior, not intent. And once again, we see the same pattern emerging. The margin for human judgment is shrinking, while the margin for error is disappearing altogether. This is where many careful drivers run into trouble. They don't see themselves as distracted drivers. They don't text and drive. They don't scroll social media at highway speeds, but they do glance at their phone when it buzzes. They do adjust to their GPS when traffic changes. They do check a notification while waiting at a light. Under the new definitions, those moments can be enough. Picture this scenario. You're stopped at an intersection, waiting for the light to change. Your phone vibrates. You look down for a second to see if it's urgent. A patrol car is next to you, or a camera system is monitoring the intersection. You drive away when the light turns green, thinking nothing of it. A short distance later, you're pulled over, or days later, you receive a citation in the mail. The explanation doesn't matter. The law has already decided the outcome. The safest response to this new reality is also the simplest, even if it feels inconvenient. Your phone needs to be out of sight and out of reach while driving, not on the seat, not in the cup holder, not mounted where notifications can catch your eye. If you need navigation, set it before you start driving and leave it alone. If you need to make a call or respond to a message, pull over completely. Hands-free systems can help, but even they have limits depending on state law and how they're used. The goal isn't just to avoid a ticket. It's to eliminate situations where a system or officer can interpret your behavior as distracted. In this environment, prevention is the only reliable protection. Now, when you step back and look at all three of these rules together, a clear pattern emerges. Mandatory vision testing, real-time insurance verification, and aggressive distracted driving enforcement may seem unrelated at first, but they're all driven by the same philosophy. States are moving away from occasional checks and toward constant verification. Instead of assuming compliance unless proven otherwise, the system now verifies compliance continuously. Your vision is checked more often. Your insurance status is monitored in real time. Your behavior behind the wheel is observed by technology, not just by human eyes. This represents a fundamental shift in how driving is regulated. In the past, many consequences followed an event, an accident, a traffic stop, a violation. Now consequences can occur without any incident at all. A missed insurance payment triggers penalties automatically. A vision issue surfaces at renewal instead of after a crash. A momentary glance at a phone can result in a citation without a conversation. The system is designed to intervene earlier, but it also demands a higher level of awareness and responsibility from drivers. For many people, especially older drivers, this shift feels abrupt and unforgiving. It challenges the idea that experience alone keeps you safe and compliant. It requires adjusting habits that have been comfortable for years. But understanding this pattern is empowering. Once you realize that enforcement is no longer occasional or reactive, you can adapt. You can check your insurance status regularly. You can prepare for renewals ahead of time. You can change how you handle your phone in the car. These aren't dramatic lifestyle changes. They're small adjustments that align you with how the system now works. The drivers who struggle under these new rules aren't the ones who are careless. They're the ones who assume things are the same as they've always been. The drivers who stay ahead are the ones who recognize that the rules of the road haven't just changed on paper. They've changed in how they're enforced. And once you understand that, the remaining question becomes simple. How do you adapt in a way that protects your freedom to drive your finances and your peace of mind? That's exactly what we're going to talk about next. Once you understand the pattern behind these changes, the next step becomes much clearer. The goal now isn't just to follow the rules when you're reminded to. It's to build habits that keep you compliant at all times without stress or last-minute surprises. Driving today requires a more proactive mindset than it did even a few years ago. The system assumes that drivers are constantly verified, constantly monitored, and constantly responsible for staying up to date. When you accept that reality, adapting becomes far easier than fighting it. One of the most important adjustments is shifting how you think about routine tasks. License renewals are no longer something to handle when a reminder shows up in the mail. Insurance coverage is no longer something you set and forget, and phone use in the car is no longer something you manage moment by moment. These areas now require deliberate structure. For example, scheduling an annual vision exam, even when you feel your eyesight hasn't changed, puts you ahead of the process. It means that when renewal time comes, there are no surprises. Keeping a simple monthly reminder to check your insurance status ensures that a payment error or lapse doesn't turn into an automatic penalty. And deciding ahead of time that your phone stays completely out of reach while driving removes any ambiguity about what's allowed and what isn't. For senior drivers in particular, these habits offer something important: control. There's a common fear that new rules are designed to slowly take driving privileges away. But in reality, preparation often leads to the opposite outcome. When your vision is documented, your insurance is uninterrupted, and your driving behavior is clearly compliant, there's far less room for restrictions or complications. The system is looking for assurance. When you provide it consistently, you reduce the likelihood of being flagged. Independence isn't lost because of age. It's lost when people are caught unprepared by rules they didn't know had changed. It's also worth recognizing that these changes affect more than just driving. A suspended registration or license can ripple into other areas of life. It can make it harder to get to appointments, care for family members, or maintain routines that support your health and well-being. Insurance penalties can raise rates for years, affecting household budgets long after the original mistake. That's why taking these rules seriously isn't about fear. It's about protecting your quality of life. Small actions now prevent big disruptions later. So, let's bring everything together clearly. First, if you're 65 or older, expect in-person renewals and vision testing. Don't wait to be told. Prepare early. Second, treat your car insurance as something that needs active oversight. Automatic payments help, but they're not enough on their own. Verify coverage regularly and be especially careful during renewals or provider changes. Third, eliminate distractions entirely while driving. Not just texting, not just calling, but anything that draws your attention away from the road or could be interpreted as such. These steps aren't extreme, they're practical responses to how enforcement now works. And here's the most important takeaway of all. These rules are not temporary, they are expanding. States are watching each other closely, and successful enforcement models spread quickly. What starts in a handful of states often becomes standard nationwide. That means staying informed is no longer optional. It's part of being a responsible driver. Laws can change quietly, but consequences arrive loudly. The drivers who stay informed avoid those moments altogether. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a sense of confidence, not concern. These changes may feel overwhelming at first, but they're manageable when you understand them. You don't need to overhaul your life or give up driving. You just need to adjust a few habits and stay aware of how the system now operates. Knowledge is what keeps you ahead, and preparation is what keeps you protected. If this breakdown helped you understand what's changing and how to adapt, take a moment to like this video. It helps others find information that really matters. Share it with someone you care about, especially a parent, a grandparent, or anyone who drives every day and might not realize these rules are already in effect. And if you want to stay ahead of future DMV updates, driving law changes, and policies that affect your daily life, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'll continue bringing you clear, straightforward explanations so you're never caught off guard. Thank you for spending this time with me. Drive safely, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next update.